The resonance assessment chamber at Kelvith Intake Station is a glass-walled cylinder, 8 meters across, with a padded bench along the inside wall and a drain in the floor that nobody ever explained to me. 22 assessment nodes ring the ceiling at intervals precise enough that I spent my first 2 minutes inside counting them. I had nothing else to do. The thing hadn't started yet. I was the only human in the cohort. That was not unusual at Kelvith. What was unusual was that I was the only human who had cleared the intake biometric, passed the species baseline card, and then listed under the field-marked sensory modality, primary, the words, cochlear implant, bilateral, currently set to off mode. The intake clerk had looked at that field for a long time. She had the eyes of something that had evolved in dim water, wide and pale and very still. She looked at my ears, then at the field, then at my ears again. Off mode, she said. Correct. You will be unable to hear the assessment prompts. Yes. She stamped the card. She was a clerk. It was not her problem. The cohort sat outside the glass on a tiered observation bench. 14 cadets, all of them species I've been briefed on and promptly filed away under categories like large and blue and seems irritable. Examiner Vossareth stood at the control plinth, a 3-fingered hand resting on the initialization panel, and delivered the standard address through the chamber speaker system. I know this because I can read lips tolerably well when someone is facing me through glass, which she was not, so I got perhaps a third of it. The parts one caught were neural calibration, stress band, ascending sequence, and this assessment has a 91% completion rate. I assumed the remaining 9% was not flattering. The nodes activated. I know this because the 2 cadets nearest the observation glass went rigid at the same moment, shoulders climbing toward their ears, necks stiffening in the particular way that something unwanted is happening inside your skull. Whatever the array was pushing through the chamber, it was pushing it at a frequency the human auditory system registers as approximately nothing. I sat on the bench. I counted the drain tiles. There were 11. The array escalated in bands. I know this from the readout panel. I could see reflected faintly in the glass, the numbers climbing in increments that correlated exactly with the progressive discomfort visible on every face in the room outside. By band 3, a cadet in the second row had both hands pressed flat against the sides of their head. By band 5, 2 more had leaned forward with their foreheads resting on their knees, which I recognized as the universal posture of a being who has decided that smaller is better right now. My readout stayed at a single line of text. Subject, non-responsive. Array calibrating. I turned the paper cup of water on my knee. They'd handed one to each of us on the way in, another tradition nobody explained, and studied the way the water sat completely still. No vibration. The array was mechanical, not structural. Interesting. Band 7. A cadet directly across the chamber from me. One of the large blue ones had slid off the bench entirely and was sitting on the floor with her knees pulled up and her head bowed. She was breathing in the careful, measured way of someone managing something difficult. I found a maintenance request form in my jacket pocket. I had picked it up from the intake desk because the rack of forms was there, and I'm a person who picks things up from racks of forms, and I smoothed it against my knee. The examiner appeared at the glass. I saw her because I had been watching the reflection intermittently, which gave me slightly more warning than I would have had otherwise. She was looking at my readout panel. Her expression, I had been briefed that her species communicated distress through a particular flattening of the orbital ridge, and hers were very flat, communicated distress. She touched her earpiece, spoke to someone I could not see. A specialist arrived 4 minutes later. I know it was 4 minutes because I had been counting the drain tiles in rotation to pass the time, and I had completed approximately 3 full rotations. The specialist was small, gray, and moved with the focused efficiency of a being who had been pulled away from something they considered more important. He examined the readout panel. He examined the array nodes. He turned and examined me. I gave him a polite nod. He pulled a handheld diagnostic tool from his case and began cycling through the array's internal readings. This took some time. He went through 3 screens, scrolled back, went through them again. His orbital ridges did not flatten. He was, I thought, a being who kept his distress internal. But his stillness had the particular quality of someone who has found the answer and does not yet want to admit what it is. The examiner appeared at the glass door. She opened it. The sound that entered with her was somewhere between pressure and vertigo. The edge of whatever the array was producing at band 9, bleeding through the open door for the half-second before the seal reestablished. I registered it as a brief thickening of the air and nothing more. She crossed to the specialist, conferred in terms I could not hear, and then turned to face me. She said something. Her lips moved. I caught the word recalibrate and the word array and the word immediately. I held up the maintenance request form. She looked at it. She looked at me. She looked at the readout panel, which still read subject non-responsive. Array calibrating, because the array had been calibrating for 11 minutes and was not going to stop calibrating until someone told it that the absence of a neural stress signature was not a malfunction. I had, with no particular hurry, filled in the maintenance request during the assessment. Array operating within normal parameters. I had written, recommend updating subject classification protocol to account for bilateral cochlear implants in off mode. No defect detected. Request closure. The specialist took the form from my hand. He read it. He read it again. He handed it to the examiner without looking at her. She read it. Outside the glass, the two cadets who had made it through Band 7 were watching through the observation window with the particular attention of beings who have survived something and are now very interested in what happens next. The cadet on the floor had not moved. The examiner wrote something on her tablet. The specialist wrote something on his. Then they stepped aside, and I watched the examiner's hand move to the control plinth, and the numbers on the readout panel descended in careful sequence back to 0. The door opened. The assessment was over. I stood, picked up the paper cup, still half full, still perfectly still, and set it on the bench for whoever cleared the room. Old habit. Leave things tidy. In the corridor outside, the cohort reassembled by degrees. The blue cadet who had been on the floor walked out last, moving carefully, one hand on the wall. She stopped when she reached me. She had the look of someone who had just been on the wrong end of 11 minutes at Band 9 and was conducting a rapid reassessment of several assumptions. She looked at my ears. She looked at the door I had just walked through. She looked at my ears again. I said nothing because there was nothing useful to say. My intake card, when I collected it from the window that afternoon, had a new annotation in the assessment result field. The clerk who handed it to me was not the same clerk who had stamped it that morning, and this one did not pause or comment or look at my ears. She simply passed it through the slot, and I took it and read the annotation while I walked. Resonance assessment. Score withheld. Incompatible baseline. Recommend protocol amendment. Intake form field 14. Sensory modality. To include OFF mode implant classification. Cohort ranking. Not applicable. Examiner note. Subject completed full assessment duration without reported distress. Array performance confirmed nominal. I folded the card and put it in my pocket. Somewhere in the administrative stack, a protocol amendment request was working its way towards someone's desk. Somewhere in the assessment records, my name sat in a column that had never previously contained a human entry, next to a score field that the system did not know how to populate. I had been at Kelvith intake station for 11 hours. I had not heard a single thing that had happened inside that chamber. I had, by most reasonable definitions, passed. The drain, I decided, was probably just a drain.